One argument that I heard recently was that the 9th July letter is actually connected to 7th July conversation that Srila Prabhupada wanted this July 9th letter as an eternal directive. On the same subject, let us hear from Hamsaduta Swami's words, one of the 11 appointed Ritviks.
So everybody will quote Prabhupada's books that he wants everyone to be.
This is very important because when it comes to initiating, it isn't about whoever is nearest. Beyond a trace of doubt that Srila Prabhupada wanted these 11 disciples to act as Ritviks and not regular gurus. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Hare Krishna to all the devotees. I am delighted to welcome all of you for this video titled as Return to Srila Prabhupada. Return to Srila Prabhupada is like the spiritual Ghar Vapsi. It's an ardent appeal to both, number one, self-proclaimed gurus who were responsible for deviating the final order of Srila Prabhupada since 1977. It is the time for them to rectify the mistake by returning their so-called disciples the most valuable property to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. It is also an appeal to the New Age Krishna conscious devotees to scrutinize the facts and to decide for themselves whether to surrender unto a real guru who can take us back to Godhead like Srila Prabhupada, or to the imitation gurus who can never give us such assurance. It is my humble request to consider the points that would be presented in this video with a neutral mind, meaning without any preconceived notions. Just like Srila Prabhupada mentions, open quote, a devotee should have intelligence to know who is deviating. Surrender by your intelligence, but don't surrender your intelligence. So Prabhupada writes this to Balimardan in 1974. In the same spirit, we wish that you use the power of discretion, sense and logic to unravel the truth that was hidden for all these years. We will today discuss in detail regarding the 9th July 1977 letter signed by Srila Prabhupada. We are often questioned that is it fair for Ritviks to put up all this fight and reject the gurus on the basis of just a letter? It was not just a letter, but a formal written directive signed by Srila Prabhupada and sent out to all the leaders of the organization, that is GBCs and temple presidents. It is also the last official written document sent out to all the leaders of the movement, and you can imagine how much weightage it should carry. Just like a will left behind by the father, Srila Prabhupada gave this final order to manage the initiations of the new joinees after his Mahasamadhi. Therefore, it is not just a letter, but the life and soul for all the sincere disciples out there. As you can see the July 9th letter displayed here, the opening statement of the letter is, recently when all of the GBC members were with His Divine Grace in Vrindavana, Srila Prabhupada indicated that soon he would appoint some of his senior disciples to act as Ritvik, representative of the Acharya, for the purpose of performing initiations, both first initiation and second initiation. As you can read in the first line, recently when all of the GBC members were with His Divine Grace in Vrindavana. Now the question is, when did this meeting between GBCs and Srila Prabhupada happen? And the answer is 28th May 1977. Therefore, this letter written on 9th July is the continuation or the culmination of the GBC meeting on 28th May 1977. Let us now take a sneak peek into how does the 28th May conversation begin. Satsvarup. Then our next question concerns initiations in the future, particularly at that time when you are no longer with us, We want to know how first and second initiation would be conducted. Prabhupada, yes, I shall recommend some of you. After this is settled up, I shall recommend some of you to act as officiating acharyas. Tamal Krishna, is that called Ritvik Acharya? Prabhupada, Ritvik? Yes. So this means that Prabhupada had already talked about it sufficiently in the past. Otherwise, how would Tamal Krishna Maharaj immediately recall Ritvik? Therefore, the context of the July 9th letter is based on 28th May conversation, which began with the question on initiations, how to handle initiations when Prabhupada would no longer be physically present. So therefore, the July 9th letter was a directive meant to handle the process of initiations after Srila Prabhupada winds up his Bhauma Leela. One argument that I heard recently was that the 9th July letter is actually connected to 7th July conversation and not at all linked to the 28th May meeting. The 7th July conversation between Srila Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was all about handling the prospects who were waiting to be initiated. Their hope is that if this connection between July 9th letter and the 7th July conversation is somehow or other established, then they wish to give a twist to the tale by saying that 9th July appointment of Ritviks was only meant to handle the temporary demand of initiations. Unfortunately, they cannot succeed in this narrative because the 9th July letter starts with when all of the GBC members were with His Divine Grace in Vrindavana, which is actually referring to 28th May. Because all GBCs did not meet Srila Prabhupada on 7th July. Rather, 7th July was only a room conversation between Prabhupada and Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And also, as part of the confession by Tamal Krishna Maharaj in 1980, he recollects what happened actually was that Prabhupada mentioned he might be appointing some Ritviks. So the GBC met for various reasons and they went to Prabhupada, 5 or 6 of us. So this, what Tamal Krishna Maharaj is telling, is clearly referring to the meeting of 28 May 1977. Next, please look at the highlighted word indicated in the opening statement of this July 9th letter. If you look up on the dictionary, the synonyms for indicated are advised, desired, recommended, suggested, preferred, specified, etc. So, without getting into the jugglery of words of the 28th May conversation, of course, we shall have a separate video to dwell on the nectar of 28th May conversation. But for time being, the conclusion of the 28th May discussion is all about appointments of Ritviks and not regular gurus. I am not saying this, but the letter, because of the usage of this word, indicated. Now one might wonder, if both 28th May meeting and the 9th July letter are connected, then why did Srila Prabhupada talk about regular gurus by order in the 28th May conversation or the meeting? And then later, why did he appoint Ritviks in the 9th July letter? Very simple. A merciful father, who is the managing director of a company, wanted all his children to grow up and become eligible for succeeding him to the post of managing director. And the father was training them too. But when he did not find any of them qualified, he changed his mind. Similarly, there is no doubt that Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to become Diksha Gurus. And he has talked about it on several occasions. Of course, with a phrase on my order. But finally, he decided to keep them as Ritviks. That is the prerogative of an Acharya, who is also the founder. Nobody can question this decision. So now one may ask, is it the fault of the spiritual master that he couldn't find qualified disciples? Let's hear from Srila Prabhupada himself on what he says about this subject. Prabhupada, so far designation is concerned, the spiritual master authorizes every one of his disciple, but it is up to the disciple to carry out the order, able to carry out or not. It is not that the spiritual master is partial. he designates one and rejects other. He may do that. If the other is not qualified, he can do that. But actually, his intention is not like that. He wants that each and every one of his disciples become as powerful as he is, or even more than that. That is his desire. Just like father wants every son to be as qualified or more qualified than the father. But it is up to the student or to the son to raise himself to that standard. Atreya Rishi, yes, I understand. Prabhupada, if you are incapable of raising yourself to the standard of becoming spiritual master, then that is not your spiritual master's fault, that's your fault. So, room conversation in San Diego on June 29, 1972. So, lastly, even in the final will executed by Srila Prabhupada on the 4th of June 1977, which is in between 28th May meeting and the 9th July letter, we can find this excerpt, open quote. In the event of the death or failure to act for any reason of any of the said directors, a successor director or directors may be appointed by the remaining directors, provided the new director is my initiated disciple. Kindly mark this phrase, provided the new director is my initiated disciple. This goes on to establish further the fact that Srila Prabhupada always wanted Ritvik system of initiation. And as further detailed in the July 9th letter, every new devotee getting initiated has to be the disciple of His Divine Grace. Whereas the fallacy in the current Guru system is that they have unauthorizedly placed Srila Prabhupada in the Purva Acharya position. Then how will this will of Srila Prabhupada be executed? At a time especially when there are no disciples initiated by Srila Prabhupada present on this earth. Now, hypothetically, let us assume, for the sake of discussion, and more importantly, to give satisfaction to all the Guruvadis, that Srila Prabhupada wanted to appoint regular Gurus as per the 28th May meeting minutes. How do we understand this? The answer is, going by the law of supersession, this written directive sent out to all the GBCs and temple presidents on the July 9th supersedes all the earlier discussions. Second, 28th May conversation was a GBC meeting with Srila Prabhupada to discuss on some points, whereas the 9th July letter is a written directive signed by Srila Prabhupada. Just for the sake of discussion, we hear of so many practical examples of children wanting to inherit the properties of their father. And the father also might have told so many things to each one of his children on various occasions. But what will prevail is the final will left behind by the father. Similarly, this July 9th letter becomes the final order for every disciple until someone is able to produce another written directive signed by Prabhupada after 9th July. On the same subject, let us hear from Hamsaduta Swami's words, one of the 11 appointed Ritviks.
The last order of the doctor, the last prescription given by the doctor to the patient is the one to be followed. Or the last order of the commander in the military is the one to be followed. So everybody will quote Prabhupada's books that he wants everyone to be a guru, and it's very simple. You just repeat, so forth. Yes, that's true. But it's the last directive of the spiritual master which is the one to be followed. Not simply quote from the general text, but the last personal prescription supersedes all the other prescriptions.
We need to actually appreciate the beauty of every word in this letter because they are from the spiritual world. Just see, after Srila Prabhupada writes Ritvik, he clarifies the meaning as representative of the Acharya to ensure that no undue definitions are ascribed to it. Similarly, he also defines the scope of the Ritvik by saying, for the purpose of performing initiations, both first initiation and second initiation, so that We don't extrapolate the role of Ritvik to suit our own whims and fancies. This goes on to show how Srila Prabhupada was so perfect in choosing every single word of this letter. Srila Prabhupada names the following devotees as the 11 Ritviks, as you can see the list on the screen. Of course, how this list of 11 names came up is also very interesting to know, which we shall discuss in a separate video. Now, if some of you are feeling that we are basing all of the above arguments to suit our interpretation, then let us hear from the very own words of these 11 Ritviks who were appointed by Srila Prabhupada vide this July 9th letter. First of all, let us watch a short clipping of Satsvarup Das Goswami, who is second on this list.
And part of it, what more can we do? Is we've flopped as trying to be gurus or trying to carry out any imitation of his presence, but remembrance in itself is a big thing.
Next, let us read on the confession of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who is fourth on the list. As you can see on the screen, Tamal Krishna Maharaj recollects, actually, Prabhupada never appointed any gurus. He appointed 11 Ritviks. He never appointed them gurus. Myself and other GBC have done the greatest disservice to this movement the last 3 years because we interpreted the appointment of Ritviks as the appointment of gurus. He goes on to say, he was physically incapable. He here is referring to Srila Prabhupada. Tamal Krishna Maharaj is recollecting that Srila Prabhupada was physically incapable of performing the function of initiation. Therefore, he appointed officiating priests to initiate on his behalf. He appointed 11 and he said very clearly, whoever is nearest can initiate. This is very important because when it comes to initiating, it isn't about whoever is nearest, it's wherever your heart goes. Who you repose your faith on, you take initiation from him. But when it's officiating, it's whoever is nearest. And he was very clear. So this is yet another proof that Srila Prabhupada never appointed any regular gurus. Next, let us hear from Hamsaduta Swami, who is 7th on the list.
But why has it caused all this problem?
Because everyone thinks of being guru by assuming the profile of Prabhupada, thinking that they will just wave their hand and quote some verses and hundreds of people will faint or fall over and surrender and become their followers. So there's a kind of contaminated conception of Srila Prabhupada, thinking that I'll become like Prabhupada. That's the allure. It's not conducive to anyone's spiritual life to have that misconception. The real point is that Prabhupada gave a prescription for what's to be done when he leaves this planet, which is to act as the Ritvik representative of the Acharya.
Mm-hmm. Did he say that word Ritvik, representative?
Yes, it's written in a letter, like a contract or a document. It's like a legal document because it's written. And Prabhupada also used that word, but it's Prabhupada formulated the letter to be sent out and named 12 people who are to act as representatives of the Acharya. We don't find any last letter where Prabhupada says, these persons shall be my Acharyas, or they shall act as the Diksha Gurus. He doesn't write that.
Mm-hmm. So how did all the gurus and yourself, how did you all decide to be gurus?
It was a kind of, it's just like a young boy. He wants to be like his father. So one day he walks into the living room, he's got his father's shoes on, he's only 3 years old, and he's got his hat on, and everyone has a good laugh. Because, and it's not taken very seriously, Because it's natural. A boy wants to be like his father. And who is his father? Well, his father wears this big hat, he wears these shoes, and a big coat. And a child, he's honoring or imitating his father, and it's sweet, but it's not practical. We don't send them off to school looking like that, do we? In the course of time, it's become very clear to me that we, as Prabhupada's disciples, are meant to be like the priest or the clergy in the church that assists some persons who follow Prabhupada by reading his books, right? Reading his books and following the principles and so on to the best of his capacity. And he may be initiated by a Ritvik or a priest or clerk in the church, as Prabhupada points out in the case of Madhavisa and the Bible question. So in other words, Prabhupada's disciples, they can give guidance in practical matters according to their realization. But they can't, they are not qualified to act in the same capacity.
Now, with all the above 3 devotees out of 11 expressing publicly that Srila Prabhupada never appointed them as Diksha Gurus, let us stop being Kupa Manduka and let us open our eyes to reality. Srila Prabhupada could see through the anarthas in his disciples to take over the position of Guru. You might recollect the statement of Srila Prabhupada to Shrutakirti Prabhu in 1976. Open quote, "One of my disciples is simply waiting. When will the old man die so that I can become Guru?" Close quote. Of course, we shall make a separate video on how obsessed some disciples were in this matter of succeeding Srila Prabhupada to the throne of being the Diksha Guru in ISKCON. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada has stated thrice in this July 9th letter that he will be the sole Diksha Guru. You can imagine the importance of writing it 3 times in the same letter. As you can see, the first mention, after considering the recommendation, these representatives may accept the devotee as an initiated disciple of Srila Prabhupada by giving a spiritual name, or in the case of second initiation by chanting on the Gayatri thread, just as Srila Prabhupada has done. Mention 2. The newly initiated devotees or disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the above 11 senior devotees acting as his representative. Mention 3. The name of a newly initiated disciple should be sent by the representative who has accepted him or her to Srila Prabhupada to be included in His Divine Grace's Initiated Disciples book. So in conclusion, there is no way one can squeeze out anything out of the above clear-cut wordings, and therefore it is proven beyond a trace of doubt that Srila Prabhupada wanted these 11 disciples to act as Ritviks and not regular Gurus. After the physical departure of Srila Prabhupada on 14 November 1977, these 11 Ritviks told the whole devotee community that Srila Prabhupada had appointed them as regular Gurus on tape, and everyone believed because they were the senior most and closest to Srila Prabhupada. In fact, they also banned all Srila Prabhupada's letters in ISKCON, and which lasted till about 1987 or so. Next comes the interesting part. Misinterpretation that this July 9th letter is meant to be followed only up to the physical presence of Srila Prabhupada and not after his Mahasamadhi. How did they infer this? By giving the meaning to the word henceforward as up to the time of Mahasamadhi of Srila Prabhupada. This argument is not only unacceptable but absurd. The meaning of henceforward as per the dictionary is from now on, in the future. It never means until I die. That's nothing but linguistic dishonesty. Let's take an example of father telling his children, I am willing to divide all my properties and assets amongst 11 of you, my sons, and I want you to take care of them henceforward. Can any person in this world argue that the father wanted his sons to take care of his properties only till he is alive and not after that? Doesn't it sound foolish? Similarly, why would Srila Prabhupada make this directive and also repeat it so many times if it was just meant for a few months? Because Srila Prabhupada had already decided to wind up his Bhauma Leela, and he had also hinted about this to his disciples while staying at Rishikesh. In conclusion, this letter and the Ritvik system of initiation was meant to be implemented posthumously, especially when the letter began with reference to May 28th meeting, which was meant to discuss on the system of initiation after Srila Prabhupada's Mahasamadhi. Another argument to prove that July 9th letter was meant to be an eternal directive is, if you analyze the system of Ritvik initiation that Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in this letter, it was already being implemented in different phases since 1970s. That is, different activities in relation to initiation, such as chanting of the beads, choosing of the spiritual names, conducting the fire sacrifice, etc., were already being delegated to either the temple presidents or representatives, as you can see in this table. The evaluation of the candidates was done by Srila Prabhupada in 1966, but from 71 onwards, he delegated it to the temple president. And when it comes to chanting on the beads, Prabhupada did it up to 71 or so, and later on handed over to a representative, which is considered as Ritvik. When it comes to choosing the spiritual name, Prabhupada did it up to 73 or so, and then delegated it to the Ritvik representative. And when it comes to fire sacrifice, announcing the spiritual name, handing over the beads, Prabhupada delegated these responsibilities in 71 itself to the temple president. And when it comes to the subject of entering spiritual name in Srila Prabhupada's disciples book, it was always done by the secretary. In other words, the system of Ritvik initiation that Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in this letter was already in practice during his physical presence. So what was the need for this written directive from Srila Prabhupada on 9 July 1977 if it was meant to be implemented only until his Mahasamadhi? Therefore, it is beyond any suspicion that Srila Prabhupada wanted this July 9th letter as an eternal directive. I also heard recently another misleading argument that when Srila Prabhupada writes, the name of a newly initiated disciple should be sent by the representative who has accepted him or her to Srila Prabhupada to be included in his Divine Graces Initiated Disciples book, it means that it was meant only till the physical departure of Srila Prabhupada, because otherwise, how can someone send the names to a person who has left this world? So the answer is, please understand the context. The context here is referring to his office. And what is the purpose? To be included in the Initiated Disciples book of Srila Prabhupada. Now, why can't this happen in the physical absence of Srila Prabhupada? And was Srila Prabhupada receiving these names personally and entering them personally while physically present? Obviously no. As you can see in this table, it was always done by his secretary, and which can continue for eternity. Another solid proof is the letter written by Tamal Krishna Maharaj on behalf of Srila Prabhupada to Kirtananand Maharaj on 10th July, the very next day of this historic directive, and which says, a letter has been sent to all the temple presidents and GBC, which you should be receiving soon, describing the process for initiation to be followed in the future. Srila Prabhupada has appointed thus far 11 representatives who will initiate the new devotees on his behalf. You can wait for this letter to arrive. The original has been sent to Rameshwar Maharaj for duplicating, and then all of the persons whom you recommended in your previous letters can be initiated. In other words, it is merely a mental speculation to assume the July 9th letter was only meant till the physical presence of Srila Prabhupada. Because here you can see clearly the highlighted word initiations in the future. It doesn't say up to the physical presence of Prabhupada. Recently, one of the arguments that I heard was that Srila Prabhupada never talked about Ritviks system of initiation before or after 9th July letter. Therefore, they allege that it was only meant to handle the temporary demand of initiations, as in the 7th July conversation. Otherwise, Prabhupada might have talked about it several times. Completely baseless argument. Srila Prabhupada talks about Ritvik process of initiation several times. Even before we get into the details, the basic principle of spiritual life is Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittete Koriya Aikya. The words emanating from the lotus mouth of the spiritual master are the life and soul of the disciples. Srila Prabhupada also mentions in the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, 28th chapter, 51st verse, if one instead sticks to the principle of following the words of the spiritual master, he will see the Supreme Lord without difficulty. So, it is a misleading argument to say that I will only follow those instructions of my spiritual master which have been repeated several times, but not pay any heed to those which are quoted only once. Does this make any sense at all? Still, for the sake of my God brothers, let us see the references to Ritvik. In fact, in the 28th May GBC meeting itself, when Srila Prabhupada is mentioning the word officiating Acharya, Tamal Krishna Maharaj immediately asks, is that Ritvik? This itself is a proof that Srila Prabhupada had talked about this before. Else, there is no way that Tamal Krishna Maharaj could utter this word. In fact, all of you will agree with me that none of us would have heard this word Ritvik despite being born in India. And what to talk of Tamal Krishna Maharaj? The room conversation with Tamal Krishna Maharaj on 7th July, that is 2 days before issuing the 9th July order. Tamal Krishna Maharaj. These men, they can also do second initiation. So there is no need for devotees to write to you for first and second initiation. They can write to the man nearest to them. But all these persons are still your disciples. Anybody who gives initiation is doing so on your behalf. And Prabhupada confirms, yes. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you know that book I am maintaining of all of your disciples' names? Should I continue that? Prabhupada, You can see how Tamal Krishna Maharaj is asking the same question in different ways so that he gets something out of Prabhupada to suit his desires. To continue, Tamal Krishna. So if someone gives initiation like Harikesh Maharaj, he should send the person's name to us here and I will enter it in the book. Okay? Is there someone else in India that you want to do this? Next, Srila Prabhupada's letter to Hamsadut Swami on 10th July. You are a suitable person and you can give initiation to those who are ready for it. I have selected you among 11 men as Ritvik, or representative of the Acharya, to give initiations, both first and second initiation, on my behalf. A newsletter is being sent to all temple presidents and GBC in this regard, listing the 11 representatives selected by His Divine Grace. Those who are initiated are the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, and anyone who you deem fit and initiate in this way, you should send their names to be included in Srila Prabhupada's initiated disciples book. In this way, the temple presidents will send their recommendations for initiation direct to the nearest representative, who will give a spiritual name or chant on the Gayatri thread, just as Srila Prabhupada has been doing. You see, it's so clear, amply clear, that Prabhupada had appointed Ritviks and not the regular gurus. Next, this is a room conversation on 19th July 1977. Let us watch this short clip of Srila Prabhupada.
Nobody is going to tell you, make your own field and continue to become this thing, act on it.
So in this, you can clearly hear Srila Prabhupada saying, and nobody is going to disturb you there, making your own field and continue to become Ritvik and act on my charge. People are becoming sympathetic there, the place is very nice. So very clearly Prabhupada says to become Ritvik. Next, the 18th October 1977 conversation. Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna, one Bengali gentleman has come from New York. Tamal Krishna, yes, Mr. Sukumal Roy Chowdhury. Srila Prabhupada, So I have deputed some of you to initiate. Tamal Krishna. Yes, actually. Yes, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. So I think Jayapataka can do that if he likes. I have already deputed. Tell him. Tamal Krishna. Yes, Srila Prabhupada. So deputies, Jayapataka's name was there. Bhagavan. It's already on there. Srila Prabhupada. His name was on that list. Srila Prabhupada. So I depute him to do this at Mayapur. And you may go with him. I stop for the time being. Is that all right? So we can see here how Srila Prabhupada repeatedly uses the word depute, which means a person appointed to act as a representative of another official. Lord Krishna mentions in Bhagwat Gita, chapter 4, text 34, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Meaning, for receiving the jnana, real knowledge from tattvadarshinaha, those who are seers of truth, we need to do three things. Number one, pranipata, meaning surrender. Number two, pariprashna, meaning submissive inquiries. And number three, sevaya, practical devotional service. And to further explain, Srila Prabhupada states in the purport to this verse that both extremes, that is, the blind following as well as absurd inquiries, are to be condemned. He also mentions that no one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is the fashion of the foolish pretenders. So, that's all we are asking. Not blind following, not blind rebellion. Just an honest look at a sacred letter from the heart of a saint. Therefore, it is the time for every sincere devotee in Krishna consciousness to make the appropriate inquiries about choosing your guru, which will in turn decide your future destination as well. So, some of the questions that you need to ask submissively from your authorities. Number one, why was this letter of July 9th not revealed immediately after the disappearance of Srila Prabhupada on 14th November 1977? It was only in March 1978 did these 11 Ritviks made a false declaration of themselves as zonal acharyas after dividing the whole world into 11 zones. So what transpired in those 4 short months between November 1977 and March 1978? We can actually know more about this from a book titled 11 Naked Emperors, authored by Rishikesh Prabhu. Next question. Why was this letter hidden for 2 or 3 decades? Why is Tamal Krishna Maharaj giving another interpretation about this letter in late 1990s after 3 decades of a letter signed by Srila Prabhupada? And in fact, when it became public, so we will have, of course, a separate video to understand in detail about what were the intentions of Tamal Krishna Maharaj in writing all these things or confessing in 1980s or giving this different opinion in 1990s. Next, can my regular guru accept all my karmas and can he assure me of taking me back to Godhead? Dear devotees, this message is not to attack but a call to re-examine, a call to reconnect, a call to return to the clarity that Srila Prabhupada gave us. Not with anger, but with love. Not with pride, but with humility. Dear devotees, as the saying goes, you can wake a person who is sleeping, but not the one who is pretending to sleep. So if you are a serious seeker of truth, then you are welcome to post your queries on today's subject matter in the comment section, and we shall be more than happy to address them. This is not about camps. It's not about winning debates. It's about preserving the purity of the disciplic succession. This conversation is not a weapon. It is a window into Srila Prabhupada's vision. Let's not try to rewrite history. Let's return to it with sincerity and devotion. Let us honor this final order of Srila Prabhupada. We sincerely urge all of you to wake up to the reality and accept Srila Prabhupada as the sole Diksha Guru in ISKCON. And we shall consider this initiative to be successful even if one devotee returns to the shelter of Srila Prabhupada. Let's return to that instruction. Let's return to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.